Hello everyone, and welcome to the Pancake Parlay, episode 98. I'm your host, The Don, and I'm here with Chad. How are you today?
I'm good, Don. How are you?
I'm good. The Pancake Parlay is a podcast where we talk about pop culture, movies, TV shows, games, comic books, every week. And you can listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, Libsyn, and we stream live on YouTube on the channel Marketing Movies. So let's just jump in straight into our first news article. Is after the whole crisis that's happening currently at the current moment. There's more delays. Big shocker, I know, right? We know delays from Warner Brothers when it comes to Wonder Woman and things like that. We know delays when it comes to Marvel as well as Disney and how they've delayed stuff, and maybe there's rumored talks that they might go direct to streaming. We don't know. And so right now, Sony has delayed pretty much every single project that they have scheduled, and instead of more or less delaying them for a few months, they're delaying pretty much everything for a whole year. So they've got stuff like Peter Rabbit 2, Mobius, the Uncharted movie, Ghostbusters Afterlife, which I was actually kind of really wanted to watch. That's all been delayed, more or less a few months from now. And yeah, it's not really a big surprise, but at the same time, it just shows that, like, basically, I don't think anything is being really getting released aside from, like, obviously cinema wise in 2020. So like 2020 is going to go down to be one of the years of like the most boringest years when it comes to movies, I think, unless like there's a revitalization in like August or something,
which is kind of ironic because I think we even talked about it back in 2019 that like the movies that were coming out back then were so boring and all that kind of stuff. Same thing with like a lot of video games, although I don't think the video game industry is going to be suffering because we're still getting a lot of releases of them. But yeah, like it does seem to be the case that every kind of movie company at the moment is either saving face or has committed to delaying their projects until further notice, right? A lot of the kind of TV shows that I watch, like, the CW trash TV shows I watch, they've all kind of been delayed in some capacity because of the kind of pathogenic thing that's happening around the world, right? And ultimately, with Sony, I don't know, there wasn't really too much on the plate that, I guess Ghostbusters Afterlife, like, I mean, I might watch that. Morbius, I don't know if I'd ever want to.
yeah, but it connects to Spider-Man now, so you gotta watch it, right?
That's a bad thing. That's a bad thing because it's Sony Spider-Man, not Marvel Spider. But what else has been delayed?
For what they have, they obviously the Uncharted movie, which I think was pretty much shooting as we speak, and then that got delayed, which has just been in development hell for so long. And then there's all these other films that I don't really know of. Like, obviously, there's like Peter Rabbit 2. Like, I watched the first Peter Rabbit. I grew up with Peter Rabbit. That's kind of cool.
Yeah,
and then
so did I.
Yeah, and they got stuff like called Greyhound and Fatherhood, but I have no idea about these projects. And of course, the untitled Sony/Marvel film, which is probably like the third Spider-Man film, I would assume.
Spider-Man. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think ultimately it's like a good thing that these film productions are getting delayed because I don't know. I'm very much in the boat of don't risk people's health in order to film or kind of do entertainment at this stage until we've kind of gotten everything pretty stable. But that's always been my kind of position. That's the kind of good thing with things like video games and stuff. You can kind of do them at home, whereas you can't really do that with films unless you want to film some kind of low budget action movie or scary movie in a home setting, right? But yeah, like at this stage, I think it's a good thing. And yeah, like, obviously the movie industry is gonna suffer a lot from it, but I think they were even like Hollywood was asking for like bailouts and stuff from the U.S. government.
And they said no.
Did they say no?
I think I heard they're not going to get anything.
Okay. I was fairly certain that they weren't going to get the price that they asked.
Well,
but
maybe not
they're
yet.
Going to get a little bit.
Yeah, so it makes sense because like pretty much every single industry is getting, I guess, something to compensate for what's happening. But yeah, it is very odd how everything's going to be delayed, and we've seen more and more things where even like I think like finales for certain TV shows have been delayed, and things are getting pushed back. So I feel like, yeah, within the next upcoming like maybe 2 to 3 months, maybe in 6 months, we're just gonna have not much new stuff to do it. So at least we got time to kind of catch up, because I don't know about you,
Mhm.
but I obviously have a lot of movies to watch, a lot of TV shows to
Oh
watch, a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
games. Like there's so much entertainment out there that even if entertainment completely stopped for 1 year, I think I wouldn't even have enough time still.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so much things out there that people haven't consumed yet. But there is this kind of focus on, be excited for new product, wait for new product, right? Like that's the kind of cycle that I guess, like, in these kind of capitalist ventures, like they just want you to kind of consume this one thing and then get excited for the new product, right? And then it's a rinse and repeat for it, even if the product is bad. But there's plenty of great stuff that's out there. Like for me, I've been trying to catch up with like all these comics that I'm kind of behind in. I'm blasting through like the New 52 Batman comics, and then slowly going to be trying to catch up in the Rebirth comics, because they're in the DC line of things, they're going to be having their semi reboot f- total fix of New 52 and stuff, which I think they're doing a good job. But I think we for the show, like the comic book industry's kind of in trouble as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened is pretty much the main kind of, I guess, distributor of comics, Diamond Comics, is basically ceased shipping to pretty much comic book stores. And essentially the kind of the way it works is Diamond kind of they're like this one and all type of shop where they talk to DC, Marvel, IDW, even like other
Mm-hmm.
geek type brands that pop vinyl stuff and all that stuff. They all kind of distribute through Diamond. And then Diamond just they send out I think they're called syndications or whatever, these big catalogs every single
Mm-hmm.
month. And they're just like, oh hey, this is what's coming out next month. You can go to your comic book store and like pre-order whatever's on the kind of catalog, and then you can kind of
Mm-hmm.
order it. And they've basically just stopped. And obviously since what's happening around the world, it's kind of like a kind of a weird thing. But on top of that, there's a lot of rumors slash things that are coming to fruition where people say, yeah, Diamond Comics doesn't really have any money in general. So like this
Mm-hmm.
generally seemed to be like the perfect storm of them being like, you know what, this is like the perfect excuse to kind of like bail out and just like leave and just basically be the sole person who's responsible for delivering comics to just disappear, which is very cataclysmic of, I guess, the industry, because you could even say it for a lot of things of, I guess, the manufacturing industry in the world, where if we're very too reliant on one country, and something bad happens to that country,
China.
yeah. For example, then there'll be shortages of certain things. So like
Mhm.
even Diamond to have being the sole one is it's a
Well,
problem to begin with, and then them stopping is like, okay, this is like the main problem.
I guess the problem is that I guess they had, like, I'm assuming, like the monopoly over kind of distribution of comics from the big two, right? Marvel and DC. And then also I guess the lower comics that I guess most people don't read as much, but they're still there. Again, I read Archie comics, so that goes to speak. But yeah, like it does suck. But I think ultimately, like, from what's been happening now, because there was a lot of silence, I believe, from a lot of places about what they were going to do. And I think at the moment, because all these small mom and pop comic book stores can't keep their doors open because I think it's like a cascading effect, right? Nobody's going to these comic book stores at the moment because of like the current situation with the world. Um, and therefore they can't afford to stay open, and then they can't afford to have comics be delivered because nobody's because the people who go to comic book stores are typically people who kind of enjoy the experience of like going into a comic book store, like reading like maybe you're reading a comic like fresh there. You have something that's physical, right? And a lot of these things, and I guess people like that are kind of um, like in the older demographic, like they'll be like in their late 20s, 30s and stuff like that, because they kind of grew up with an era where that was still commonplace, right? Like having something physical. Whereas I guess most people are kind of transitioning over or going towards a more digital storefront for a lot of these things. And I think at the moment, like I think there's like a bit of a plan from DC and maybe Marvel. I can't say Marvel for sure, but I think from DC, like I think one of the plans that they're trying to do is um, giving people the ability to purchase comics um, through a an online, right? Through whatever your distributor or your mom and pop store, whatever it may be. And then at that stage, you'd get access to the digital comic. But once everything kind of opens up again, you will have access to the physical copy of it as well, if that makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
at whatever store. So, and to be fair, like, when you buy some comics, you do have like sometimes you will get the code for the digital version of that comic as well. So that's something that is already a practice that's already done, but now it's like the reverse, like you pay for the digital copy and the physical copy, but you get the digital copy first and then the physical copy later. The question is whether or not this kind of system will last long enough, because again, people like reading their comics, like people who are kind of big comic book like I don't read comics usually on a weekly basis. Like maybe I'll try and catch up here and there, or read like a omnibus or something. But for people who kind of read it week to week, like they like to have that kind of collection. And so ultimately, it really comes down to whether those kind of comic book readers do end up supporting, DC and Marvel and Boom and all the Image and all that, going into this particular situation we have. I don't know if that necessarily means like the comic book, because I've been hearing online like, oh, the comic book industry is like over. I don't necessarily know that.
Well, that's the
I
thing.
definitely
I
know.
think it's one of those things. If you look at maybe trends of like the past like 20 years of sales, like obviously there was
Mm,
a crash in the '90s that everyone's well aware of, and then there
mm,
was kind of like a spark, kind of like in the mid, I'd say 2000s.
mm-hmm,
Um, but yeah, it's one of those things where it's like it kind of ebbs and flows, and I feel like maybe if you
mm-hmm,
compared it to like the past like 20, 50 years or something, comic sales in general have been down. Because
mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
the funny part of it is like comic book, I guess IP when it comes to movies and stuff is like at an all-time high, and like everything's getting made to a movie, TV show, whatever you name it, but the actual comic book sales itself hasn't really converted to those
Yeah.
numbers. And then there's still the hardcore audience that, as you mentioned before, are probably an older demographic that physically go to stores. And that's the thing, I read comics as well.
Mm-hmm,
However, it's like most of the time a lot of people like it digitally. And yeah, and even in this situation of like Diamond Comics in and of itself is just a bad idea, and that's why right now everyone's kind of shopping for their own ideas of like DC's been like, yeah, you can get it digitally, or like like Comixology, for example, like
mm-hmm,
they've been delivering digital comics for like, I would say, nearly over 10 years at some point. So it's like I
mm-hmm.
feel like they've that's kind of maybe the new future, and I feel like a lot of people, as you mentioned
Oh,
before, like that the old physical presence, like video games, but on top of that of like with comic book stores, it's still one of those areas where you can walk in, and then it's kind of expected, and it's kind of a joke where it's like you can walk in and actually start a conversation with the guy in the store or anyone around, and then they'll join in. I feel like that you don't really see that
yeah.
early anymore.
Yeah, I look. I think people kind of go to comic book, like regular people go to comic book stores for like the community, right? Like to get that kind of nerd kind of culture that you don't really get like anywhere else, from a unique perspective at least. But yeah, like I don't know, like yeah, things like Comixology. I mean, DC, Marvel all kind of do their own kind of version of digital comics, and they've been doing it for a while, anyways. It's whether or not now that's the way that people go towards, like think about it, like vinyl CDs versus MP3s, and now like people don't even necessarily buy MP3s anymore. They just buy what is it, Spotify services. That's the new system. Um, it's less about ownership and more about ease of convenience. People would prefer that, and I mean it's the same thing that we're kind of going towards in video games too, where they're moving towards a system where you're not necessarily owning the game per se. You're maybe getting access to this game for like free for 30 days or whatever, and you're paying for this service, for that 30 days. You don't necessarily own the game. I think for now it's a case like on Xbox and PlayStation you get to keep the game, but then eventually I think they'll come to a point where they'll have a price point where people are like, oh, $5 a month. but I don't get to keep the game, but I get to play all these games that I want, even though I won't play most of the games. Sure, sounds good because it's $5. Like we'll come to that point where we find what that price point is for video games. The problem is whether or not the transition will happen for comics, and I'm not too sure if that's the case, unless they kind of expand the collection that people have access to. Like, oh, we have every Batman comic, so you can kind of go through and read it, and it's in this done, and it's all ordered in this meticulous way. And I think that's kind of what they're doing with DC at the moment. They're kind of, I don't know if you've heard what it's called, the new kind of generation, which is called 5G, so fifth generation. So although I think it's going to just be gimmicky, like it's like, oh, they're going to replace some legacy heroes with other counterparts, but I think it's only going to be like a temporary thing that they're going to then later return back to the original status quo, like just to kind of get new people to start reading comics again.
Mm. But
But
yeah, there's all this
essentially,
because my whole thing was like with Diamond is just like they're withholding payments and that there's a lot of like I guess background stuff of not only just distribution but as well like payment stuff as well, and it's like
mhm.
the money's going to, and everyone has had to adapt I guess to these different changes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think ultimately, comics for a while, I think hasn't been a big kind of big money earner for a lot of these companies, right? Like, Marvel Comics, they don't. I think they kind of maybe break even or like do slightly over, but like it's kind of like uh, it gets compensated by the Marvel movies. They supplement any kind of loss that gets made because ultimately the Marvel Comics acts like an idea space where they come up with ideas for future movie ideas. I mean, there was all the rumors about how, what is it, Captain Marvel might be headlining the new Avengers movie, and that's more or less or might be an adaptation of, what is it, Civil War 2, which was a story which came out like a couple of years ago, which I thought was really kind of meh. And I don't think most people, I don't know, I think most people thought it was okay, but it wasn't as like kind of impactful as the original Civil War storyline, right? But in the end, it's just a jumping board for the movies. They just have to come up with ideas, and they kind of are able to, see what people like, and then they're able to see based on sales, based on feedback, what people are interested in, and then whether or not they can adapt it into a movie. It's no different to what they're trying to do with Star Wars at the moment, which is, oh well, we're going to be throwing stuff out of war and see what people like in the kind of High Republic extended universe that they're kind of trying to build, right? Because they even said themselves that, oh well, we're not making any movies for Star Wars at the moment. We're just kind of seeing what people like and we'll make it based on that. So they're going to shove a lot of these characters out there and see what people like and see if they can make a movie that will satisfy people. And I think that's what the comic industry is doing, and I think that's Marvel's take on things. And I think Warner Brothers and DC will probably do a very similar thing, maybe, because at the moment, like, they had success with Joker, but, Harley Quinn did really bad. And then now, what is it? Wonder Woman got delayed. And then subsequently, all these other movies, like, I'm assuming, well, Suicide Squad is done with filming. So now I think it's
But I'm
just
assuming
post
yeah, it's all like
production.
special
Yeah.
effects and all that stuff, so it's like all post stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So
there's
hopefully,
yeah.
yeah, so hopefully that will be fine. So like, we'll get that released in some capacity. But yeah, it's just like a weird spot to be, with everything kind of being pushed and stuff. But I think that's the direction where all these comics and all these companies exist. Like, all these comic book areas are kind of like hub spaces for ideas. So hopefully they come up with good ideas. I think the problem with DC is a lot of the DC knowledge is very esoteric and can't be adapted very well unless the medium allows for a lot of legacy ideas that require like long investment for the payoff, like, for all the stuff that we talked about with the CW universe doing their Crisis on Infinite Earths. Like the only reason and only way that whole thing worked was because they've had like 10 years of 10 years of like seasons from different shows functioning together and all coalescing into one thing. That's the only way it works. Same thing with Avengers Endgame, which is literally the same, like, with the Infinity War. comic, same thing. It's same kind of idea. It has a long kind of build up with a payoff at the end, but you can't do that every now and then. It's something that takes time to build, and so Marvel's able to do it because they had like a really good foundation for it. Is DC's potential tend to try and see if they can build something off what they have. I'm pretty uh, DC has to kind of start from the beginning, in my opinion, but we'll have to see where they go. I think comics are fine because they'll just be in hibernation. I think the problem is, will people come back and purchase comics when they're ready? Yes. It's just the problem is they're just going to take a financial hit now, and the people who get affected the most are going to be these comic book companies.
Well, not
Um,
only that, but it's like, yeah, the one thing that I guess we haven't really talked much about is the comic book stores. Like,
yeah,
the general person who owns a comic book store, like if I opened a comic book store, it would be a really bad time. It's just like,
yeah.
because you're not getting help through Diamond, Marvel, or DC, and
Hmm.
all you have to do is just sell your old stock. And even then, if you're allowed to actually go out, because you're not really essential. So
I mean, look, I'm gonna just put it out there. A lot of these stores, yeah, they sell comic books, but at the same time, they also sell, a lot of pop culture stuff.
yeah,
Like
I'm assuming a lot of comic
vinyls
book
and
stores these days sell a lot of pop vinyl figures. So
yeah, man. Like, we've got a place in Melbourne called Minotaur, and in that store, it's just like walls and walls of the things because people love buying miniature, cute versions of characters that they like from different mediums. A lot of like statues, a lot of board games, card games, collectible cards, like Magic and Pokemon and stuff like this stuff is what sells at comic books. They are more likely what makes the store money over just comic books. But the problem is people aren't really interested in going into comic book stores for those reasons either. So yeah, I think that's where they also get hit too. So we'll see. I think they'll be okay. But yeah, I think at the moment comic books are just going to take that whole Star Wars approach and just kind of see what fans like and try and adapt it into a movie. Although that hasn't really worked too well for Star Wars at the moment, pleasing the fans or supposedly trying to please the fans. Because another piece of news that I'll mention is so Chris Terrio recently kind of said in an interview about the Rise of Skywalker that he's never rewritten a movie as much as he had for the Rise of Skywalker. So that's kind of like a behind the scenes kind of look at what was going on there because this guy he wrote for movies like Batman v Superman, uh, and Justice League and Argo and stuff, and I know for um, Batman v Superman and Justice League they did have to do a lot of rewriting. Um, but like you said, like he wrote more, he rewrote more for the Rise of Skywalker, and I think that fundamentally comes from the fact that um, you know they didn't know what they were doing over there, and then ultimately they had to try and figure out which direction they had to pivot to in order to quote unquote please the fans.
well,
Um,
it was his job to lose type of thing, where it's like, I don't think that's like a near impossible job to kind of salvage episode 8, and it's kind of like,
mhm,
I guess like there could have been slightly better things, but it's like one of those hard tasks, and he must have just been like, okay, I want to please fans, but I also need to continue the continuity of what would happen, and I need to like retcon a lot of things that happened previously, and it's like, as you mentioned before, it just shows that there was no plan, or like there was no foresight of like what would have happened. And
mhm,
just having that
exactly.
many, to put in perspective, like, Justice League had, not only rewrites but it had reshoots as well, like quite a lot of
Hmm.
them.
Yeah.
And it just kind of puts into perspective like how much, if he rewrote more for episode 9, that means there must have changed so many things in the process, like too many.
Hmm. Too many. Look, just to quote him, he says, "It's like a tide. There was a new script every morning, but we just kept going at it and going at it, loosely thinking that it's not good enough, and it never was good enough. Luckily, the production team is so good that they can shift and adjust. We course corrected as we were going. Uh, we're trying things, and some things didn't work out, and some things aren't ambitious enough." Some things are overly ambitious. So yeah, like ultimately, like they had a lot of ideas because again, I think they were rushing. The movie didn't stop like kind of filming and post production till like what the like October, November ish, something like that from memory. So
Yeah,
yeah,
something
like
crazy like that where it's like, like everyone
mm,
there were rumors, but I'm pretty sure they were relatively true since a lot of the rumors that did come out of Lucasfilm were true, where it's like, oh, the film's not done yet, or like there's multiple cuts of a lot of different things. There was a lot of stuff circulating, but I wouldn't be surprised if, yeah, like it didn't really finally get completely made until like the next month
much later.
before it got released, more or less.
hmm but yeah, I guess, again, these are just extra kind of news that we're finding out about Star Wars, and
The
just kind
gift
of
that keeps
bringing.
on not giving.
Yeah, I get. Look, it just needs more content for us to talk about, but I think ultimately it just kind of gives me that kind of personal satisfaction that I had from back when I watched the first movie, and just shows that, yeah, even back then I smelt how bad this franchise was going to
Back in
be.
2015, you're like, I know this is gonna end in a bad way. I just know
Yeah,
something bad's gonna
yeah.
happen.
And yep, vindication is all I get every single time I find out extra information about the Star Wars movie. But yeah, onto more positive things. A couple of weeks ago, I mentioned a uh, particular crowdsourced like computer project called Folding at Home. It's essentially like a piece of software that you can use to donate your like computing power, your GPU power, in order to do medical research. And you kind of do that passively by like kind of donating your GPU cycles, then it'll use it in order to kind of form like a network in order to model like vaccines or like a structure of a virus or something like that. So it's called Folding at Home, and recently, as of I think March 30th, it passed 1 million downloads. Um, and I think it has access to like you can use it if you have a AMD GPU. I think before it was just NVIDIA, but now you can use AMD too. And recently it like so in terms of how many flops it's done. It's let me see because I got the number beforehand because it's quite large. So
It's got a lot of
um,
zeros.
yeah. So 150 quadrillion flops, which is short for floating point calculations per second. So that's a lot. It's 1.5 times 10 to the 17. If you want, if that helps people kind of visualize it, it's very very large. So again, 150 quadrillion flops. We often talk about and also known as because the number that they initially gave was 1.5 exaflops, but that doesn't really kind of give an idea to the average person what it is. It's a lot. We kind of often talk about like on the gaming space about like, ooh, it has this much teraflops and this much that.
It's like if
But
we all compute together, we can have the most powerful thing of all time.
well, at the moment, like it's the same as 112 112,000 RTX 280 Ti's simultaneously running. So that's what it functions as. So it's really cool. It's something free that you can download, and if you're on your computer anyways, like you can just kind of run it in the background. You can either have like a little bit or a lot, and you can even pick like what you want to kind of help towards researching, like whether it be like cancer or Parkinson's. That thing that we can't mention hasn't been updated yet, but I think they will be doing it in the future. So yeah, have a look out for it. It's pretty cool and a good way to kind of give back while you're gaming. Maybe give yourself like a handicap, when you're playing online. But yeah, that's a pretty cool thing that I liked hearing. That everybody's kind of uniting around doing it. But something that everybody is also kind of united about is GameStop finally stopped making their employees work as essential workers in the States. Like, we talked about it before about how they were making their employees still work. And I think, like, in a lot of states in America, they had to issue an order, like an actual proper like court order to like tell GameStop to close their stores because they're not essential. And it's kind of sad because I think in 2020 alone, GameStop closed 320 stores, which is like a lot. But maybe it's not like in the grand scheme of how many GameStop stores there are. Like,
I'm assuming
yeah,
they're pretty much it'd probably be like the obviously EB Games and everything. It's probably be like over here where it's like nearly every single like if there's a shopping district, shopping center type of
there's
thing,
one there.
there's gonna be one type of thing.
Yeah. Well, in America, there's 5,500 locations now as of recording. So like, yeah, there's still a lot, but I guess like America's a big place. They're slowly closing up shop, and I think with all the stuff that's happening around the world, it's a pretty horrible time for GameStop. And their employees, because I think ultimately, with every store that closes, it's more people who are kind of like losing their jobs, and that's obviously a really sad thing.
Not helping the economy at all.
Yeah, but speaking of our EB games, there was some actual good news because Final Fantasy, and I guess Square Enix, released from the development team released a notice talking about how, due to the kind of worldwide circumstance that everybody's kind of dealing with, um, they're going to be giving European and Australian gamers access to the game like 7 days early or something like that. So it came out. It was supposed to come out in April 12th. Sorry, 10th. But it came out early for everybody, and so everybody here in Australia is like playing it. I know you've played a little bit of it, Don.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts initially about the Final Fantasy VII remake?
Well, first things first. I'm a big Final Fantasy fan. This
Mhm,
essentially my YouTube channel before I renamed it used to be called Final Fantasy, and it used to have other things. So I'm a big Final Fantasy fan. Um, Seven is not my favorite, but it's a lot of people's favorite, and I get it.
mhm.
I get it. Um,
Which one's your favorite? Just
my
so
favorite my
the
favorite's 10.
10. Okay,
Yeah,
good one. I
yeah.
like that one.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
I think I prefer the more like turn based, like actually it's like very strategic in it and it's kind of place, and it's a good story as well. And it's yeah,
Mhm.
you can do a lot of different stuff, but like yeah,
Yeah,
so, I go ahead.
yeah, no, I was gonna say because they kind of turned into like the active battling, right? With like the ones after 10,
Well,
like
yeah, because
or
essentially
whatever it
it was
was.
turn based up until four, and then like four was kind of turn based, but you had that bar that needed to fill up.
Yeah,
So it was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
and it was
After
basically
yeah.
4 to 8 that did the bar to fill up, and then 9 went to turn based, 10 went turn based, and then from then
Mhm.
on out they've done like the MMO style with 12, and then like 13 was like the active time
Yeah,
battle, and
that's
then
the one.
15 and everything probably now onwards is going to be much like this game is going to be like Final Fantasy 15, where it's
Oh
more
yeah,
like action RPG.
yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. I hated. I tried to play like because my cousin, he was a huge fan. He told me stories about how when his parents went overseas, um, that was around about the time Final Fantasy VII came out, and he would play the game instead of going to school. And he would just call in to and tell the teachers that, like, pretending to be like his parents, like my uncle and auntie, and would say, "Oh, he's sick and he can't come in." But he would just be at home playing Final Fantasy VII. Like that. That's how much of how deep he was into playing Final Fantasy back then. And yeah, I remember he had like 13 or whatever it is, and I tried to play. I was like, holy shit, this is so fucking boring. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't.
it's a different type of battle thing because essentially the whole
Yeah,
criticism was like there's an autoplay button and
yeah,
it
yeah,
already
and you
has
just
things
walk
like that.
away.
However, I think with 13 it did a lot of things where essentially the whole point of it was you had these little presets of like classes where it's like
Hmm.
you got the guy who's guarding do this and it's like these presets, but you got to switch them mid battle, and that's kind of the battle system where it's like you have to constantly switch different types where it's like you're going to be healing for like 2 minutes until we stagger this person, then you're going to be the buffer guy. So
Yeah, I don't
it's
know.
a very different battle system that I don't think a lot of people got, and it's very
Mm,
different.
yeah, but it doesn't. It also doesn't sound very fun because it sounds like it's more like management rather than being an active participant in like a fight, so to speak. Whereas like that's where like Final Fantasy 15 like was great. I love that game. up until the very end when my game like fucked up on me. But that's besides the point. Like the merit of the game itself was very, very fun. And yeah, like I'm a big fan of the kind of what is that? The action gauge or whatever it
The,
is.
yeah,
Like
active time battle. Yeah,
active
ATB.
time
Yeah.
battle. ATB. So I like that because I obviously some people also know like Chrono Trigger, like probably my favorite RPG of all time, and that had similar mechanics to it. But yeah, like I prefer the turn-based style like regardless, but that's just me. I've played a lot of like kind of Dragon Quest recently. Dragon Quest 11, really fun, and that's turn-based too. I would actually really recommend you to play it as well, like maybe after you finish Remake, because that was a really fun game too. But yeah, like you've been enjoying your time, with what you've played so far. Is it very similar to Final Fantasy 15?
Um, I'd say it's. I think the only criticisms that a lot of people like, there's a lot of criticism with 15, but I think the battle, I think a lot
Hmm.
of people just said it just didn't feel that great to hit people or like use
Hmm.
combat. There was something slightly off. But with 7, it has this weight to it where it has that
Hmm.
good feedback when you like you hit someone with, Cloud's sword or Tifa's punches and things like that. It has that kind of connection,
Hmm.
that just feels good to do. So like it's basically the same thing of like if you ever play a shooter, like Halo does it really well, where it's like when you shoot someone, it just feels so good to do it. Um,
Hmm.
they nail the combat, and I've really played a few hours of it, obviously, but for what I've played, it is something new, but it's also familiar, and I think this is
Hmm.
exactly what people. I know it's one of those hyperboles, but essentially, it's like I think this is what pretty much everyone kind of wanted if when you think of
Hmm.
a Final Fantasy remake. Um,
Well, I think the thing that it kind of reminds me of, and I think a lot of people maybe in the who's listening might agree to with too. Like a lot of people really like the Resident 2 remake game that came out last year, and for a lot of people that was like their game of the year. Even though I think the main reason why that was the case was because there wasn't any or a lot of good games that came out last year. So unfortunately, like the remake and like I don't know one other game like what is it, Death Stranding, right? That was like another game people really really like too. But like that Resident Evil remake, like it kind of scratched that itch like everybody wanted because people wanted like a Resident Evil game, but Resident Evil kind of dug itself in a bit of a hole in terms of like what they can make like future games about, I guess. Although they certainly make it like I think their last game, like the one that was
Resident Evil 7, it was like it's a departure
yeah,
because
seven,
it
right?
was first person, but it was actually
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
Um,
people love that game. Yeah,
yeah,
I
because
think it was the one
I think
before
that
that.
because I think they shifted to more of an action focused, and then it was like, okay,
Yeah,
where's the horror
6.
element?
Yeah, giraffe blowjob simulator. I
Yeah,
like to call it because that's what the 6 looks like. But yeah, like a lot of people, I remember like that wasn't good. But I wouldn't be because now like I think either it got released recently or it will be releasing
Resident
soon.
Evil 3
Three,
remakes coming out
three.
in like a week as well.
Yeah, so there's that too. So I wouldn't be surprised. Like Resident Evil 4 is a really popular one with a lot of people, so I wouldn't be surprised.
That thing will never get remade because it gets ported everywhere. Like
Nah,
every
but
it's
I think
every
that's
single device has that.
no, but that's what I'm saying, right? Like that makes it a prime target for a proper remake for people to do rather than a port, right? Like something that expands upon it while also keeping it fresh. Like that's and the thing is like a lot of these games, like including Final Fantasy VII remake, what it does is it makes people believe that oh hey, this is like exactly what I imagined the game was when I played like 10 years ago, right? So every generation, like there'll be like what is it like another Final Fantasy VII remake like 20 years from now, and then people would be like, oh, that's like what I played back in 2020, but it'll be like an updated version of it. Like that's what will come out, but that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I just want the games to be good. And ultimately, like it really devastated me when I found out that there was a production of like a 3D version of Chrono Trigger that got cancelled because I think like it got leaked or something like that.
Well, that's the thing.
Really
I wouldn't be
disappointed
surprised
because
at some
I
point
love that.
Square Enix either touches upon the Chrono like
Oh,
brand
definitely.
again, or actually completely remake it as well at some point.
I think there's a higher likelihood of a 3D remake coming out, like maybe when it's has this, I don't know, like maybe I don't know how long it's been out. So what, it came out in 1992, right? So maybe like when it's like 40th anniversary comes out, like maybe they might come out with a, oh hey, look, we've been making a 3D version, or hey, we're doing this thing, and it's basically the same game. But yeah, we'll see. I think Final Fantasy VII Remake is a good like launching point for what Square Enix will see as a potential like venture capital for future kind of remakes of old games that people like. Because I wouldn't be surprised if people really like Final Fantasy 8 and 9 too. So I wouldn't be surprised if like maybe down the line like they might make a kind of updated version of those games if this game continues to sell well.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's the thing. I think it will because obviously it's seven. Seven
yeah,
has the brand recognition more than I think
and it's
every other
also a
Final
meme,
Fantasy.
right?
Yeah,
It's like Battletoads, right? Like they got it. It was always in their back pocket where like, oh, we'll release it if we're really struggling for sales, we'll release it.
and there you go. And so far I played a few hours of the game and it's really good. You've got good voice acting.
Mhm,
Expands on a lot of the I guess the semi like middling characters that kind of really have little to little to do. Like
mhm,
Jessie. But now everyone's like talking about Jessie. She's like the most amazing girl now. Everyone's
mhm.
talking about like new the waifu wars with her as well. So there's like all this
Sure.
there's all this like
Yeah,
stuff where
makes
it's like
sense.
but it's expanding the universe and it's like
Mm.
I think this is kind of like yes, it is split up in multiple parts. I don't know if it's two or going to be three, or if it's going to be. Obviously, it's going to
So
be.
I'm.
Yeah,
I was gonna say I was thinking maybe it'll be like three.
yeah,
But I think hopefully two. I don't know how. I mean, it really depends. If the end of this game is them leaving Midgar, um, and that's it, then like okay, like yeah, maybe like the next game, because yeah, again, I don't want to spoil it too much for people because obviously it's like a new game.
is it though?
Well, you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
Yeah,
Other
yeah, but
spoilers
that's but that's the thing.
for an old
But that's yeah, but that's the thing.
game.
Since there's so much extra content, who knows at this point? There's gonna be so much extra side quest missions. But yeah, I think everyone does speculate it's gonna be that Midgar point that is probably gonna
Yeah,
be the end of this one because no one actually knows where it's gonna end unless someone speed is running the game right now and just being like, I beat it.
yeah, I'm sure people have already beaten him. But I guess like my point was like, because Midgard's technically is a very small section of the game because you basically are there initially and then you leave. And you don't come back there till later again, right? Spoilers. But but the main point is, but now they're expanding like what you're doing in Midgard, and then like all these side missions and things like that. So maybe the time there is much larger, but then it allows for, okay, now the rest of the game is on part two, and then everything in part two gets wrapped up rather than kind of dragging it out. But we'll see. There's always the like I think the thing is they have the room to kind of have additional things and do additional side quests and missions that they maybe didn't get to do. Maybe they have like a new weapon that you can like kind of fight and stuff like that. Because why not?
Yeah,
Like they have
you
the
might you might as
capacity.
well add on what you have, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do that. Or like, I guess the bad route would be everyone's speculating like, okay, DLC to make certain people live, or
No, they won't do that.
or it wouldn't be DLC. They'll do a whole thing where it's like, I got a feeling. My whole hunch is,
Alternate story.
well, my whole hunch is there'll be a way to do it. Somehow revive this certain person. However, it's going to be the most like insane Easter egg secret that you're gonna do this insane thing. I got a feeling that they would do it. If they don't, it's a missed
Mm,
opportunity. I think it'd be.
nah, I don't
I
know.
think
I
it'd
don't.
be really cool to do it.
It may be, but I think more people would be upset over it because it'd be like trying to get like it's doing a Chrono Trigger, literally.
It's
Because
literally a Chrono Trigger.
yeah, it's literally something you can do in Chrono Trigger. So I don't think that they would do it in this game, but yeah, I mean the point I think it kind of opens up to more avenues to kind of have DLC characters, or like sorry DLC kind of missions, and add in things that weren't originally in the original game, but then expand on like the world that they're in. I think that's the big thing. They're doing it in this game with Midgar. Like, why wouldn't they do it with like the rest of the world that's out there? So yeah,
Yeah,
I but look,
yeah, and it is a pretty big game, and I remember they talking about like we're not going to do it because it takes too long to render a city. So who knows
mhm,
how long ago like the next part's going to be, or any DLC plans, or there's just so many things that are still very questionable. Like for example, this is
mhm,
releasing pretty much at the end of a console cycle. We know that there's 1 year exclusivity to like the PlayStation
PC,
4, so I'm
yeah,
assuming at some point like it'll go to PC, maybe Xbox, and
yeah.
like even on top of that. Um,
Mhm.
you could even
Maybe
just say,
maybe there'll be a Switch port. Who knows? Everything's on the Switch now.
yeah, because the
Um,
Switch is like the middleman, where it's like everyone's just like, yeah, you're not like direct, you're Nintendo. I think everyone just gives a pass to Nintendo because they're Nintendo. They're
the
just like, yeah, fine.
Nintendo. I mean, so yeah. Well, Sony's just like, oh well, you two, we'll let you guys play our shit too.
Well, that's why I questioned about the Chrono Trigger stuff, because Chrono
Mm,
Trigger, did get technically remade on like the DS, for example. And I
it did. Yep.
so I'm very curious of like, yeah, where Chrono Trigger is, because I'm like, is that like a Nintendo semi
Well,
thing?
I think no, no. It's a Square Enix product. And also because the latest, the most recent release of Chrono Trigger would be on Steam because there's the Steam version of Chrono Trigger, which I haven't purchased, but I'm like half considering. Like there was problems with it initially, because like the original version of the game was like a direct port of like the mobile version. But I think over time they like fixed it, and then there's like elements from the 3DS games, because the 3DS game had like additional endings and stuff like that. And you had like this kind of Pokemon style like battle arena. So yeah, there was things like that in it. So I think technically the latest version is on Steam. So I don't think Nintendo has any kind of right to where that game is.
Yeah,
Like it's all
true, true.
so yeah. Um, but yeah. But speaking of Nintendo, their switches have been running because of the big crisis that's happening. The switches run out. And that's kind of led to like an inflation of the prices. Like trying to grab one of the, I don't know if you saw it, it was like a Switch Ring Fit. It's like
The
this
Ring
kind of,
Fit game.
yeah,
Yeah, I heard about
yeah.
someone losing a lot of weight actually doing it. So going on
Oh,
them.
okay. Well, but yeah, but that particular device has gone up in price like significantly. Like in the like 300s, like $300 for that stuff, because it just sold out everywhere because everybody bought it, because they all just want to kind of do exercise at home and stuff. Um, and I find that kind of hilarious. But obviously, it's a bad thing because it just means less games for everyone. The Switch was originally kind of made in China, but like Switch, I think Nintendo, because of all the tariff stuff that was happening between America and China, before this whole kind of big thing, Nintendo switched over a lot of their console production to Vietnam as well. So I think despite that, there's still a slowdown in how many Switches they can make and get released, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, just because like Nintendo, like I think last year like underreported how much they were going to sell, and that like dropped their stocks, and now they probably have to readjust. But I think ultimately it's good because people just want Switches now. And the Switch is an amazing console. I still need to finish Breath of the Wild because again I'm still at Ganon. Need to beat Ganon. It'll be really easy, so I can go around and play it.
That's the thing.
Uh,
Everyone now is playing a Switch because like Animal Crossing came out and it was like, I can't go outside, so I'll virtually
exactly.
do it on Animal Crossing and cut down some
Well,
trees and
yeah,
stuff.
exactly, right? And it makes sense. Like, why not? But another good piece of good news is so it's going to be Super Mario's 35th anniversary, or I think it's like just Mario in general, but I think it's Super Mario actually. But the main point that I point this out is apparently there's like rumors. Video Games Chronicle kind of released an article about how Nintendo may be releasing remasters of their old classic titles such as Super Mario Sunshine, Super Mario Galaxy, Paper Mario, and maybe Super Mario 64, which the port on the Nintendo DS was excellent. I loved that particular game. Played the shit out of that game. I
Yeah,
don't know how.
they had added characters and different ways to do things. It,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah,
actually
yeah.
really great.
Yeah, it was excellent. Like you started the game off as Luigi, I think, and not Mario, from memory at least, which was super cool. And yeah, it added like a lot to the game. So it would be really cool, like Super Mario 3D World. So I think like if they're doing something like, oh, we're going to be releasing all these, because I think ultimately like a lot of video game uh, you know, I guess consoles and developers and stuff, they want to have backwards compatibility with their old titles. And I think this is probably like Nintendo's attempt to try and do like a very similar thing. Because again, everything's kind of moving towards like a more PCer architecture. So, if they get like something that's a proper port onto a Switch, sure they keep it within their ecosystem, but at least now they can kind of just port that over to their next console, right? And the thing is, everybody's just gonna buy it again. They're just gonna buy Super Mario Sunshine HD edition again because there's a proper port out and they can buy it on the Nintendo eShop and emulate it or whatever it may be. I think that's the ultimate move here. Is people are gonna buy the shit out of these games because it's Mario or Zelda or Metroid or whatever it may be.
It would be cool if they had like a physical release as well, which instead of just a digital one, because I do
I
remember.
think they will.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Yeah.
be surprised, but yeah, and I'm hoping that they do something more for it, because I do remember, I think for Mario's like, I think 25th anniversary or something like that, it was like on
Hmm.
the Wii. There was a Mario thing, and it had basically like kind of, it more or less just ports kind of ROMs on the disc, and it was kind of okay. They didn't really there weren't really much of it, and it's one of those rare, semi-rare games on the Wii. So I'm hoping with this one they've put like extra new features on there, maybe like leaderboards, who knows, like random little small things, or like something to celebrate Mario. Because whether you're a Sony person or a Microsoft person or even a PC person, pretty much Mario is the face of gaming. And I would say like it is a big celebration for having a big milestone like that. And I feel like there's a lot of Mario titles that I guess, like, yeah, for example, like as you mentioned before, Super Mario Sunshine, you can only really get that on the GameCube. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, let's bring it out and release more of these types of games that even the Paper Mario games, to what is it, there's Paper Mario games and the Mario, even the Super Mario 64, not Super Mario 64, the RPG one that was actually made by Square
Hmm.
Enix. That one's
Hmm.
just, that's like, at least port that to somewhere else, because that's pretty much nowhere to be found.
Yeah, exactly. I think the thing was a lot of the kind of original, I guess, like like Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga and stuff like that, like all those kind of games I think still will be relegated to the DS. And I think like games like that you can still play, and it's pretty easy to get your hands on it if you're clever enough to, because DSs are really cheap. Like I remember I bought a Nintendo new 3DS XL for, like, I think that's what it's called. It's a huge thing. I was like, oh, I might as well upgrade, because it was only 99 bucks from Amazon, which is really cheap for Australia, by the way. Which means it's only cheaper in America, right? But this was like brand new, and I was like, oh, I have to get it. And yeah, you can play all your and the thing is, like, now you can just catch up because you don't have to worry about, oh, they're releasing like a new game on the DS. Like no one's releasing anything on that bad boy anymore. Not
Yeah,
really.
yeah. 3DS is basically gone, and and
For the
Switch
most
is the
part.
way to go, and it's like that's their
Mhm.
new venture going forward.
Yeah, and it
Eh,
makes sense. They're selling a lot, and the console is really good.
yeah,
As I
it's
mentioned before, I
basically, yeah,
recommend getting it.
it's what the Wii U wanted to be.
Exactly. But speaking of video games, you've been playing quite a few at the moment.
Yes, that's
What
why
have you
I
been
guess I've
playing?
been lacking in my watching stuff, but sometimes you got to mix
Yeah,
it up a
yeah.
bit, or else you get bored of one or another, more or less. Um,
Oh yeah, definitely.
yeah. So the one of the first games that I played and beat is pretty much my first Soul game I actually beat 100%. Is The Surge 2. Um,
Hmm.
this is a game from a kind of, I'd say they're like a middling studio. I think they made a game called Lords of the Fallen, which is like very Dark Souls esque. And then they made the first Surge, which I got up into the second area and just could not complete it because the controls were very janky, and I just could not beat the boss. The boss was just like impossible. And I think, with a lot of these games, the boss is the choke point. and I'm not that big of a fan of Souls games. Like, I understand them, I get them. However, a lot of the times I'm just like, I'm not putting the time/investment into this game if it's gonna troll me or do something stupid to me, because I just have no patience for that. Luckily, Surge 2 doesn't do that. The Surge 2 is hard, don't get me wrong. Bosses, you have to learn the patterns nearly to 100%. You've got a single enemy that can kill you if you don't pay attention. All of that's there. However, it doesn't troll you with stuff of just like, oh, you fell down here and you're dead, or like I think I've heard infamous stuff with Dark Souls where you're on rooftops and if someone hits you, you fall down and you die. Like, to me, I hate that stuff. I absolutely hate it. Or like your sword is too big and you can't swing it and it hits the walls. Not for me.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I get you. Yeah. I definitely know where that's an issue in Dark Souls and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's why, like, at some point, like, after finishing this, I kind of want to dip my toes into this and be like, because I played the original of Demon Souls, and I kind of cheated my way through that because it's unbalanced as hell, because you're just gonna be a sorcerer and just cast shit from afar and nothing hits you.
Did you play? Well, I think that's the thing, right? I think the big thing with the kind of Souls games is like, so long as you're like not following like a guide and you figure out how to beat the game, even if it's like, if you play the game for the first time and even if you like figure out a way to cheese it, so long as you've learnt it by yourself, then that's fine. I think what people within the community kind of get pretty like salty about is when people like look up guides on how to beat bosses, or they find out like how to get through things or get through a path really quickly and know all the kind of ambushes and all these kind of like I remember when I played man, I probably have to play Dark Souls as well, because I like the game. I like the game. It's just like, there comes to a point where it's just like, ugh, like I don't want to deal with this shit, and then I put it down and then I play another game instead. Even though I do like a lot of aspects of the games, like there'll just be a point where it's like, oh well, yeah, I don't know how to do this. I'm sure there's a solution, but I don't know it. Like, as a character and as a player, I don't know what the solution is, so I just have to kind of suffer in silence while I figure it out. Like, I remember I beat some boss and I purely did it using like bow and arrows, because I was just like, oh well, I'm just gonna kill it from a distance. And then like my friend was like, oh, you killed that boss with like a bow and arrow? Like, didn't that take forever? It's like, yeah, but I didn't lose any life.
It's like, but I won, didn't I?
But yeah, but I won, didn't I? Exactly. Right. I think it was like a giant moth creature. I don't know what its fucking name was, but yeah.
But
like,
yeah, either way, that's the thing. Either way, at some point, I do need to play the. I want to dip my toe into it, and like, because I just know how trolly it is, but I'm just like, that's the one thing that gets me. It's just the troll nature of it. But and that's the thing with Surge 2, it doesn't do that. It's like it's hard, but it doesn't do that. As mentioned before, I didn't use a guide. There are a lot of things where it's like, it has the risk reward system where it's like, instead of souls, it's scrap, because it's kind of set in this kind of techno future sort of thing where there's like human hybrids of like this kind of like X machine type of thing, and like there's people like half machine, half people. And that it's kind of like an industrial setting, and it's very different and unique compared to like the Souls games, which is obviously a very medieval fantasy type game. So, but yeah, it has that, and then there have been many times I walk in and all of a sudden it's the boss dungeon, and I have all this like stuff like saved up. I'm like, oh crap, and then yeah, it's one of those frustrations. But that I guess that's part of the experience of these games, where it's like you have to be cautious of literally everything that you kind of do. And yeah, the story is nothing too much to write about. You just escape from prison. There's this kind of cult that has these kind of religious undertones, and they believe in like this techno god type of thing, and you're just kind of there.
Techno god,
like like technology god. I and then basically you're just there to wreck up shop.
Yeah, sure.
But I think no one really. I didn't really play the game for the story. It is very much more in the combat. The combat is far better than the first game. As I mentioned before, the first game was very janky. It was very it had its janks, but this one the combat's a lot more fluid. You have so many different weapon types. You got like these little like arm kind of like slashing things. You got big swords, long swords, hammers. these electric chainsaws, you name it. You even have like a little drone that can shoot out little lasers and things like that. That's really cool. But I think the hook, out of all the systems that it has, is just the dismemberment system. Now I don't know if Dark Souls has it, but it's a thing where you can aim for the head, the body, left or right arm, or left or right legs, and you can target them. Some have armor on them, some don't. And if you chop them off, you have a percentage chance to get, I guess, that item that it has, and then you basically cut off each individual limb for a different enemies, and then you can make a whole set of their armor or get their weapon. And yeah,
I can tell you that Dark Souls doesn't have that as a function. Like there are stuff like weak points and stuff, but not like dismemberment. I think dismemberment is very rare in a lot of games, just because like you either like use it for like shits and gigs, like oh hey look you blow up a character and its limbs go everywhere, or you use it like in a very like kind of fallouty way, right? Like where you target certain things and there's like a percentage meter and things like that. So it's a pretty cool system to do it. Like like chop an arm off and get like a gun or get a ring or get a I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's pretty much that same thing as you mentioned, where it's like, you cut off an arm, like, and you can kind of tell where it's like, it tells you, like, okay, this armor part, or this has this type of thing, and you kind of look at it, you're like, okay, this person has this armor set, and obviously, if you complete the whole armor set, you get different bonuses and all that type of stuff, so, like, to me, that's, like, the fun part that got me going, is not only the combat's quite fun to do, but as well the dismemberment part, it's like, okay, that guy's got that piece of gear, I really want that piece of gear, and then you like literally actively target that piece of armor. That obviously you can go for the easy kill, go for the head or something that has no armor, but if you want the risk reward, you do have that. And yeah, I just really enjoyed my time with it. I really enjoy, obviously, the level design, and I think this is obvious for pretty much all the Souls games, I'm assuming, so that's why I kind of want to get into it. It's just, I actually really like the level design, where it's like, there's not many levels, however, everything is interconnected, or there's sections that are, cut off, but then you got some sort of item, and then you get to explore the area, and then it all kind of connects, and then you have all these shortcuts. So all the pain that you went through at the start is like non-existent. I feel like that to me is like, it's very satisfying. Like, oh, thank God.
That's very Dark Souls. Dark Souls is exactly like that.
It's
got a very intricate level design. Same thing with I was gonna say also with Jedi Fallen Order is exactly very similar to that as well. Although that has a bunch of levels, quote unquote planets or something that you go to as well. But a lot of the world is kind of functions in a very similar way.
Yeah, I just really enjoy that system, so that's why I want to try out a little bit more of these games. And I also has this other stuff where it's like, you have, you kind of semi upgrades, is they're called implants. So they're like little chips where it's like, if you do a perfect directional kind of parry, you can get a boost for attack damage for like 10 seconds, or you can, because essentially it kind of works off in that you get a health bar, you get a stamina bar, and then you got this battery bar, and your battery bar fills up your kind of implant bar, where it's like, you can heal yourself that way, but it always depletes. So sometimes it's like, you want to get a character that has a good build of like building up stamina, or like a one that like keeps batteries alive type of thing. So there's a lot of stuff that you can move around with. And I think at the start of the game, I was kind of being really newbie in a sense, because like one of my I guess armor classes, it was just like, oh, you get this bonus, but like you get more scrap, which is like technically the currency, and I'm just gonna go through that way. But then I switched to another armor class which just had way more armor, and it was a lot more easier from then on out. I'm like, okay, I gotcha. Like I can, and you have three different defaults, so you can switch between each one and be like, okay, I want to use my farming class and just use it that way. So it's really cool how you can switch everything around. And either way, the reason why I played it is it's free on Xbox Game Pass. And the game came out like last year in like October, September. And I'm just really enjoying it. The developer is relatively quite small as far as I know, because I don't know many people who know The Surge at all, or Lords of the Fallen, which is kind of like their first Souls type game. But I'd say definitely go check it out if you're a fan of the genre. And it is different from I'd say Souls, but I would say it's got similar elements to it.
Oh, okay, cool. And so the other game that you were playing was Wolfenstein is it Youngblood?
Yes, Wolfenstein Youngblood. I think New Blood was the other expansion, but
Yeah, I wrote down New Blood, but I think but I think it's Youngblood. Yeah.
yeah,
So so this is a game that you can play multiplayer, right?
yes, which I didn't do because
Okay.
I just despise multiplayer people,
Okay.
unless I'm fighting against them. Like co-op is very hard. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, this is a I guess departure when it comes to the Wolfenstein games because it's kind of like it's a RPG. That's the easiest way to explain it. It's a Wolfenstein RPG where you have levels, you have perks that you level up.
Well, an RPG shooter.
Yeah,
Like,
RPG shooter,
yeah,
not like
yeah,
it's not Final Fantasy. It's
yeah.
more like Borderlands, I
Although
guess.
that would be, hey, that might be cool.
Yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure there was like a Doom RPG, right? But anyways, regardless,
Yeah.
um,
But yeah,
you know,
this one's set in the 80s, and you either play one or two characters. They're pretty much all they're similar, just depending on like the power that you get at the start. You play what is it, BJ Blazkowicz's daughters,
daughters, yeah.
twin daughters, and basically you're just kind of there and you kill some Nazis. And since it's set in the 80s, it basically just fills itself with 80s references and cheese, but like it has a slight tongue-in-cheek thing to it because it's like, what if the Nazis were like controlled the USA during the 80s, and like there'd be things but they're
Hmm.
slightly different, and that's pretty much all set dressing kind of, and there's some cool stuff here and there, but the story is just kind of very plain of just like joining the underground resistance, going on these kind of semi-side missions, and
Hmm.
trying to kill this general guy who has this kind of power, and this god power pretty much, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, and the story's kind of like whatever. You kind of play majority these types of games just for the action, and I thought it wasn't too bad. I think a lot of the heavy criticism came in this game because a lot of the things that you need to do in the game, you do need to have a human player to do. Um, but I since I knew that before going in, I just put it down on like easy mode and just kind of went through, and that's the thing. It was still hard at some parts. Don't get me wrong, because like I leveled up quite a bit. Like I was like level like 40, and I think out of a potential like 100, but like pretty much max is 50, I think. Um, and yeah, even the final boss was quite hard. Even the final
Hmm.
boss, I completely cheesed that as well because I just kept on running around shooting, running around and shooting, and I like nearly died so many times. But I kind of micromanaged my way out of there because
Hmm.
in a sense of having an RPG, if you're too underleveled, it has like a little like
Warning, yeah, yeah,
skull
that
on it,
you're on.
and then
Yeah.
I'm just like, okay, yeah, I can't do it, but I basically completed the game still to do it, and I thought it was quite fun because you have all these RPG elements that you can dual wield. Obviously, you can more throwing stuff. You can up your stealth. You can get skills to
Uh,
hold out like the big those big guns that you kind of get for like you
mhm.
usually can't keep them, but you can keep them in inventory if you get that skill. So there's many different ways to play, and there's a lot of different side missions. There's missions where like they're not 100% missions, but like they're kind of like brief missions where it's like if you're in the area, someone will give you a telecom being like, hey, we got this thing, plant a bomb or like kill this general guy. um so it's kind of got
Um,
these RPG elements kind of spread across the whole game, um in a shooter, and I don't think it's too bad. It's just yeah, as I mentioned before, I also played this on Xbox Game Pass, so I didn't really necessarily pay for it. And I feel like this is one of those games like if you pay for it for like $20, I think you'll get your money's worth more or less.
yeah, I think the problem with Youngblood was it was kind of marketed as like a $60 game where it's more like a $20 game, which doesn't necessarily means it's a bad thing. But I think like maybe you might not be satisfied with it going in to it thinking it was like any of the previous two entries. But I was gonna say the one like I saw a few gameplays of it. I do find it pretty cool that there's like this camaraderie between the two like sisters, and that I think like if you make like you wave, not wave, but maybe you can do like hand signs or something, and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
give each other armor and stuff. So that's pretty cool. I like that you can kind of do that, and there's like an in-game kind of motivation to emote at your friend or that you might be playing with.
yeah. Because
In
they have these signs where you start off with the default like get more health, but you can have things where it's like have a signal boost for like have an attack boost for the next 20 seconds, and instead of just a normal wave, it could be like the devil horns or like a
Yeah, yeah,
random
yeah.
dance move. So like there's all this different customization you can definitely do with the game.
Um, playing it single player, can you switch between the two sisters, or are you stuck playing as one of them?
You're stuck playing with one of them. However, there is no real difference aside from
Okay.
the starting perk, which like one of the sisters has one where it's like if you like do the run, and
Mm-hmm.
if you hit an enemy with the run, it kind of like pushes them down to the ground. And if you level up enough, or if they're on the ground with lower health, they just basically explode into guts.
Oh.
And then the other girl's more like the stealth where she has like a cloak, and kind of sneak around. But like since at the start of the game, I'm just like, yeah, I'm just gonna go full balls to the wall. Let's go. And you can buy
Mm.
the stealth perk later on. It's just instead of being free, it's
Uh,
5 perks. So there's no real difference. And
it's just whatever you start off with is just how your play style is at the
yeah,
beginning.
more or less. Because like either way, like even in general, I found stealth pretty hard in this game. There's certain sections where you can probably stealth around it or like kill certain people, but then at some point, there's always going to be someone who does see you. I think.
Well, I was gonna say, like, even if they don't see you, wouldn't they just see your sister who isn't as stealthy as you, right?
Yes,
Like,
I think it does one of those things where it's like what is it
oh,
by
it doesn't detect
like
you.
Elizabeth and Bioshock or Ellie in The
Sure,
Last
sure,
of Us,
sure.
where it's
Got it.
like she's there, but the AI doesn't necessarily recognize her as there.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's
got
not
it.
really the player's fault. Well, say if it was
Yeah,
actually another player playing, then yeah, obviously
yeah, it
the
would.
trigger.
Right.
So if anything, I
Gotcha.
played the easier version. But yeah,
Mm.
either way, if if it is down to $20, I'd say kind of go buy it slash play it if you're a fan of Wolfenstein. It won't take too much of your time, but I think it kind of got me hooked for a while because it has a really good like feedback system when you shoot people. It does the same thing as well, where it's like there's like these things called brothers, and they're kind of these really big, I guess, semi bosses, and every time you
Hmm.
kill one of them, you get like a different weapon. So it could be like a big laser weapon, one where you kind of shoot up grenade explosives and things like that. And these weapons, pretty much like a Souls game slash Metroidvania, opens up a section for another path that you couldn't access before. So it has all these different like branching paths, and you can go down. The only one actual negative problem I absolutely hated, um, was this area called the underground. And these underground tunnels kind of connect each
Oh, it's
individual
like the
level.
hub, right?
Yeah, it's kind
Like the
of well,
hub
the
level.
hub's fine, but like
Oh,
to even connect it, but every single level is connected through the underground still, so you don't always have
okay.
to fast travel to the hub and come back. You can still go
Oh,
through the underground, and some missions are done in the underground, or you can only access certain areas when you go through the underground. And to do that, since it's dark, you need to put your flashlight on, and the only way to do that is if you use one hand weapons, which is like pistol slash the submachine gun, which is fine because you can upgrade your guns to a exorbitant amount with silences and things like that. But the problem is that you always run out of ammo, and then at some points I just have to hit people like physically with my melee attack or just run away because it's just not worth it. That was the one
mm,
thing where I'm like I
okay.
feel like this was completely unbalanced. Well, maybe unbalanced for a person just playing by themselves.
Yeah, maybe, or maybe it would like function as a way to like, oh, maybe you're like underleveled, even if they went like kind of dull. It was just like a function to try and dissuade you from going in a certain direction at a certain point. But who knows?
Yeah, but
Again, if
possibly,
it's
but yeah, but either way, I guess the other thing that kind of frustrated me as well, much like Assassin's Creed Odyssey semi did at some points, is the
yep.
auto leveling.
Hmm.
Auto leveling, I don't like it. I don't like auto leveling. Um, you
Oh, like wait, what do you mean by
like
auto
as
level?
in for example, if you level up, your enemies level up maybe like a little bit
Oh,
lower than you.
like as yeah, yeah, yeah. As in like there's a I forget it's not I forget what it's called, but like yeah, like
Auto
it's as in
scaling,
balancing.
something like that.
Yeah, auto scaling. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's the
yeah,
one thing I don't really like too much because I'm like, at what point? What's the point? Type of thing of like doing side missions aside from just really liking the game. Obviously there needs to be a balance of like, you can still do it, just make it so much where it's not always maybe a challenge all the time. Like at least if you're gonna
mhm.
put the hours in leveling up something, at least be semi powerful enough to beat people.
Yeah. I mean, I always kind of found it really weird. In Assassin's Creed Odyssey, that like, like in my opinion, if you kind of assassinate someone, it should be if it, like it your reward is the fact that you instantly killed them. There were like so many situations where yeah where I don't know, for me, like I would kind of attack somebody, and like there's like an upgraded assassination, But then like they would be on like a little sliver and they wouldn't die, and therefore that like lets the whole guard. Like I always kind of found that like really dumb in the game. Like the whole point of like Assassin's Creed was you're an assassin and you get rewarded for stealth kills and being meticulous about it. That's why I think what is it, Assassin's Creed Origins was a far more kind of superior game, even though it did like very similar things. And also the weapons, like the unique legendary weapons, were usually far more like interesting or unique in the function of a game. So you'd like switch out and have like more utility when you use them. But yeah, like I totally get what you mean.
Yeah, like I just never liked the system, like because yeah, especially when it comes to an RPG, it's like what's the point? At least try to make it balanced in such a way where it's
Yeah.
yeah, like or like you can do it, but make sure that like if you are leveling, for example, it's not too much of a hindrance.
I
You know,
think I think I think ultimately the reason why they do it in order to kind of artificially kind of uh like bloat the difficulty and make the game longer, so to speak.
well that you're
Um
gonna justify that $60 price tag, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm gonna like that's the kind of thing with all these Ubisoft games. It's like, oh, do these random things at these random locations, collect these flags or collect these, I don't know, books or some shit. I'm assuming the new kind of, I guess the Viking game that's coming out, the Viking-based Assassin's Creed or whatever, is gonna probably follow like a similar kind of edict, but like
But
hopefully
I think a lot of people did complain about the auto leveling, or to a certain degree that it was too
scaling. Yeah,
much. Yeah, auto scaling. So I'm assuming they'll maybe scale like they'll quote unquote scale it back, sort of. Because I wouldn't
I
be
don't know.
because that just yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people were vocal about that, and I feel like hopefully they'll like you can still kind of keep it, just make it sure it's not too much of a hindrance where it's like what's the point of leveling to 99 if everyone else is 99 with you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
But yeah,
But I guess
that's pretty much been my my game talk. Like that's what I've basically been playing. Yeah, I've had fun, but all because of the Game Pass. Because like I have all these games backlogged, but like the
mhm.
Game Pass is like releasing these games that I don't have slash I'm semi interested in, but I haven't bought. So I'm like, yeah, fine, I'll play them. That's kind of been my gaming journey for the moment. But tell me, what have you been doing?
All right. So I've been watching some movies. Again, like there's always
Shock,
like the
shock,
track.
because you never watch
I know,
movies.
I know, I never do. Well, not like by myself or something. Usually I watch it in like a kind of group setting, but like yeah, it's usually quite rare for me to go out of my way to watch movies. But I've watched well, the first movie I watched was Onwards. Now, this is Pixar's like latest kind of movie event. That it came out in February, and I think it hasn't been super successful um, from a kind of movie standpoint because of like the big kind of worldwide issue that's happening. People kind of don't want to go to the cinemas to watch movies. Surprise, surprise, right? It was made with a budget of like 200 million basically, and only returned 104. That's like really, really low. But I think like unlike with a lot of other movies, I think like this is probably the case that like yeah, this did have like a lot of effect on the movie and itself being successful. But I think like the movie, but I think ultimately, I think the best way to kind of describe this movie is it's kind of like Frozen for guys, if that makes sense. In a
Okay,
sense
then
that
please tell me
to
more.
elaborate. So tell you more. Okay, so Frozen is a story obviously about like a tale of two sisters, right? And their kind of relationship, and their kind of relationship to the world that they're in. In Frozen, it's about like being being princesses and being royalty, but then like also trying to have like self discovery and romance and love and stuff like that. Whereas Onwards is about two brothers who um, try and like as they kind of go on with their journey learn about the importance of family and the importance about being confident in who you are and stuff like that. Like it's kind of like with a lot of these Pixar movies and Disney movies, it's all kind of tick boxes, right? It's like, is it about family? Yes. Is it about
Friendship,
friendship? It's
all
about
that
self
stuff.
discovery, growing up, things like that. So that's the similarity in the sense that like they're not kings or anything. Okay, so Onwards is set in like a fantasy world where like in the past, magic creatures used to be everywhere. Elves and minotaurs and mermaids all used to like coexist and use magic to like as a way to kind of unite and live live in the world, right? Very medieval times, until somebody discovered electricity, and then everybody moved towards using electricity to um, make their lives easier rather than magic, which was, while powerful, very volatile, and only kind of the best of the best could wield it correctly. So because electricity and technology was far more easy to use, everybody moved towards that direction. And so we're kind of thrust into the modern world where we're kind of dealing with like the two main characters, which I didn't know at the time, but Ian and Barley. So Ian is played by or voiced by Tom Holland, and Barley's voiced by Chris Pratt. I knew they both sounded familiar, but I wasn't too sure who they were. And then the mother, Laurel, is voiced by Julia Louise-Dreyfus. So there's a few like kind of big names like in this film, like all things considered.
Yeah,
But
because
yeah,
why wouldn't you be a part of a Pixar film? And on top of that, like I've heard voiceover work for actors is easy. You come into the studio, record some
you just be
lines,
you.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just do your thing.
Yeah. So Ian, like, he turns 16. Um and he's trying to like fit into his school and trying to be more like his dad, who passed away before he was born. And he's obviously he has that kind of chip on his shoulder where he's like, he wants to be like his dad, but he doesn't really know much about him and who he is and what he wants to be. His brother, Barley, he's like the older brother, and he's kind of literally like a Dungeons and Dragons player. Like in the universe, there's a role playing game that is basically Dungeons and Dragons, but because it's the world is medieval and magic centric, the role playing game is actually historically relevant, because every like all the spells in the book is all stuff that you could actually do in real life. But the problem is a lot of people don't go towards that magic direction anymore because everybody's moved away from that kind of lifestyle. But yeah, on his 16th birthday, his mum gives them this present that their dad actually left for them, which was like a staff that gave them the ability to revive him for the day. But the problem is when they try and cast a spell, it only resurrects the bottom half of his father, which is just like a pair of legs. So the rest of the movie is dedicated to the two brothers trying to find a MacGuffin to try and resurrect the dad and have him around for well, whatever, however much longer he can stand, kind of be revived for, so to speak. And so
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
so
like
the two boys kind of go off on this adventure, and they kind of meet like colorful characters, but they're also kind of like subverted because um again, this is like a modern version of these kind of mystical characters. Like for example, they come across like a bunch of bikies, but the bikies are actually like small fairies, like these buff, like small tiny fairies. And one of them points out like, oh, why don't you guys like just fly? And they're like, oh, we can't fly. And it's like, oh, well, it's not that you can't fly. It's like, what are you calling us, lazy? And they're like, oh, no, I'm not calling you lazy. I'm just saying, like, your ancestors didn't choose to fly or whatever. And then they're like, are you calling my ancestors lazy? Like, it's just really funny. But like, it kind of shows that the world itself has kind of evolved beyond that point. But then everybody is trying to like touch back on their roots, which was, in this case, like Ian's trying to learn how to control magic, for example, and his brother's kind of teaching him how to do that too. But then obviously being like the classic like, oh, magic isn't real, or none of this is true or whatever, and then it turns out to be true. But yeah, I think the movie well, it's a fun movie. I don't think it's like the best work that Pixar's ever released or something like that. Then again, I haven't watched like a lot of like the latest film by Pixar. Like I haven't seen Coco, I haven't seen Um, did they do Moana or was that Disney? I don't know.
I think
Disney
that
did.
Disney did that. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
Disney Pixar. Oh
I
yeah,
think
Disney
that
Pixar. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, they did Inside Out as well.
yeah. Inside Out, I haven't seen that either. Like, yeah, there's a few movies that I haven't seen, but like, yeah, Onwards, I think is quite. It's like a fun kind of film that you can watch with a lot of people, and it has like a lot of kind of like extra things. Like for example, again, I play Dungeons and Dragons, so like a lot of stuff like for example, there's like a joke about like how a gelatinous you have to be careful of gelatinous cubes because they're these creatures that can, if you touch them, they'll just basically melt you. And they're like these really deadly creatures in Dungeons and Dragons. But they're played on for a joke in this film, as an ongoing gag. But yeah,
Yeah, well, okay. As you mentioned before, when you were talking about the general premise of the show, the
yeah, yeah.
movie, I had one thing that just kind of like went through my mind.
Uh,
Um, the general premise of the film sounds like Full Metal Alchemist, the anime,
uh,
where it's a
like
bunch of
kind
brothers
of,
who revive go on a quest to revive their dead mom slash try to get some stuff back. Now,
kind of,
it's like
but not.
obviously I don't know the ins and out details, but it feels like the general premise of just
Nah,
venturing
it
to
isn't because the thing is like, because the thing is with Full Metal Alchemist, it's like, well, they're kind of engaging in like forbidden alchemy, right? Like it's stuff that they shouldn't be doing. Whereas I guess magic isn't like forbidden; it's just something that's kind of gone like out of fashion. It's like it would be the equivalent of using a typewriter instead of a computer, right? Or using um I don't know, like a bicycle, sorry, horse and carriages, instead of a car.
Mhm.
That would be like that would be what like magic is to technology. It's like archaic and unruly, so it's not worth using. Whereas like yeah, I guess the premise of there being like two brothers, like yeah, that's a
Yeah.
similarity,
It's
but
basically
yeah.
basically two brothers, dead parent, magic slash alchemy. Like it's kind of like like I don't know.
Well,
And obviously they're probably nowhere near similar, but like I know
no, no,
that
I
you know
disagree.
it
I think there's obviously, I obviously there's like connections between the two, but the plot isn't like similar to um uh
yeah.
Full Metal Alchemist. But like the thing is, the story is pretty like it deals with like pretty like tough themes. Like as I mentioned, like again, like the whole premise is the fact that their dad died when they were at a really young age. This was like his attempt to try and um meet them when they were in their teenage years, and try and connect with them. But again, it's kind of played for gags because again they revived the dad, but they only revived the lower half of him. So he's just like a pair of legs which they have to try and pass off as a real person. Um, I have like a little bit of mixed feelings about like the gag of having the dad there. Like it was okay. Um, and there are some pretty like nice moments in it, but I think the movie could have also survived without those moments as well. Like, as in like you don't have the legs, but then the rest of the movie is still having them going and interacting with the same people and things that they have been interacting with. Yeah, like I think maybe if they came up with something a little bit more clever, like maybe it was just like the top half. But again, like it plays on to later on in the film, and I don't want to ruin too much of it because again, it does subvert the classic kind of hero's journey tale.
Is that why it's
And
like Frozen? Because it subverted the whole princess genre.
kind of. But I mean, like I said, a whole premise of the movie is supposed to be like again, it's already subverted from the very beginning. It's not a typical. It's fantasy characters in a fantasy world, but nobody
It's not
uses
fantasy
the
esque.
magic.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, yeah, it's kind of like it's like modern fantasy, right? Like for example, like what is it? Unicorns are kind of like raccoons. They like eat the trash and they're not like majestic creatures anymore like they were in the past, right? Like that's already like a gag
Hmm.
in and of itself. So yeah. Yeah, I think I enjoyed Onwards. It's a pretty fun film and nice voice acting visually. It's pretty nice, but I think like the scale of the film is pretty small in the grand scheme of like what's going on. But yeah, I liked it. So yeah, have a check out of Onward.
I will. I
Um,
will.
and the other film that I watched was The Invisible Man, Now,
Did you
uh,
see it? Ha 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 ha. That was so good.
shut up. But
Anyways, tell me more about that Invisible Man.
I was wondering whether or not this was supposed to have any kind of connection with the Mummy. You know how
Does
like the
it? Does it? Because
I
it's the
I
same.
don't
It's universal, but like, yeah, I'm assuming they
no, I
ditched that
don't think
whole
so.
like dark universe thing.
Yeah, no, it isn't, unfortunately. Because that would have been hilarious. But no, this movie is essentially about I think it's like Elizabeth Moss. I think
Yeah,
is the
Elizabeth
character.
Moss. She's a
Yeah,
Handmaid's Tale, or like I know her from Mad Men.
right.
Mad
Okay,
Men
that's
as
why
well.
she
Yeah.
kind of seems familiar. Okay. Yeah, Elizabeth Moss. She's in like this kind of abusive relationship with um her partner Adrian. And at the beginning of the film, she's like, it's like meticulously trying to like escape his house without letting him find out. Um, and it's like a whole thing where like it's kind of tense the entire time,
So
and
it's kind of like
she's
a
scared.
thriller kind of type of thing.
Well, yeah, in a way, and that's the thing. I think the one good and I think the person who directed this film directed Upgrade, which I wasn't aware of until
Oh,
after I
cool.
watched
Yeah,
the
yeah.
film.
Okay, then I should support this film more because I don't know. What 2 years ago we were just like, Upgrade's actually really damn good.
Yeah, Upgrade's an excellent film. Yeah. So, yeah, he did Upgrade in the Insidious movies. Haven't seen it. He did Saw. Interesting.
I think it's
Uh,
Australian. I think it wouldn't be because I. Yeah,
yes, he is.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
Lee Whannell. Anyway, Whannell. But yeah, he did Upgrade. Upgrade's pretty cool. I really like that film. And some of Upgrade's DNA is in the film, but like a very small part of it. There's like one action scene that's pretty dope in it because the rest of the film is like more or less like a thriller. So essentially, as you'd imagine, like but the thing that happens is she escapes, and this is the thing that's really great with the being a thriller. Um, it kind of builds up this kind of feeling of uneasiness because as you would imagine, there is an invisible man, but you're not too sure at the beginning when he's invisible. It's like much later or like kind of midway or a quarter way into the film you're like, oh, okay, he's around and he's kind of doing shit at the moment, and it's small things to like mess with it. And that's the thing, like coming from like an abusive relationship and trying to escape. Because again, the guy, he's like a wealthy optics engineer. And then after his girlfriend left him, he commits suicide, and so she's quite like reluctant to believe he's dead. But then all of a sudden, like very small things are happening around the house that's making her question her sanity, making other people question her and what she's doing. And yeah, I think that's the thing. Like a lot of this film, it kind of touches upon real life relationships where people kind of question like abusive relationships, right? Like in a sense
Mm.
that whether or not like you can really trust your partner, and like I don't know if you ever heard the term like gaslighting, which is just like being told that like what you're experiencing like isn't real. Like that's something that she's constantly having to deal with because she's literally dealing with an invisible man and nobody her because and that's the thing that kind of like there's a lot of really plot holes in this film. However, if you can kind of get like and to be fair, I couldn't totally get over some of them because again, it's like the classic kind of trope where it's like, oh well, why didn't you like? There's this one scene where they visibly have her get a knife, but then she proceeds to leave the knife on the floor to go off and do something else, and it's like, why didn't you just take the knife with you? Anybody in that situation would have just done both. You know what I mean? Like there are small things
It's
like
not like a
that
video
where
game where it's like, oh, you have to choose one or the other.
yeah, exactly. Like unfortunately in real life it's more like, well, you're an idiot, and it's purely done in order to cause tension. Like for example, there's like one scene where she's in a car and you can clearly hear that the guy like went into the car as well by like she orders like a lift or something, and you can hear the back of the car like open and close. Like there's like you know like the open and closing of a door.
Hmm.
There's like a very similar sound that gets made in the back, and it's like she looks at the back and like she doesn't do anything about it. It's very weird. There's just kind of things like that that kind of break the internal consistency. But I think the ideas that are presented in the film are very cool. There's a lot of scenarios where you're just like, oh holy shit, like she's in this situation now. Like how is she gonna get out of this? Or what does she do? And then most of the time it's kind of like, oh
Most of
okay,
the time,
everything.
it's like I don't know if you ever watched It Follows, where it's kind of like it can shapeshift
Yeah,
into any people, but on top of that, it's relative. It's pretty much invisible at any time. So it's like majority of the time, if you want to take care of someone who's invisible, you gotta like I don't know, step under a shower or something like that, have some steam,
yeah.
or like do something like that.
You see, yeah, you see, it follow. You see, the thing is, it follows is a very internally consistent movie. There's very, I can't remember anything that I found that was very wrong from a story perspective or like kind of like a thematic perspective. Like everything kind of made sense in universe and how
Hmm.
it worked. Whereas in Invisible Man, like yeah, like you know, at certain points, there's like without kind of spoiling the movie, like there's one point where certain things kind of don't make sense and characters should be believing what the main character is saying, but they refuse to. Like, oh, the what? Her partner is a optics scientist and has been working on a like a suit that can potentially go invisible. Oh no, it couldn't happen. Like, there's those kind of like sense of yeah. Like this is one thing. It sounds ridiculous. Like it sounds ridiculous for us because um
But like
you
in
know
universe, it
being
might make
in universe
sense.
it
Yeah.
should make sense. It should make sense. Like if I were to tell you someone an invisible man was following me, you'd think I was crazy. But if invisible technology existed, like you'd kind of maybe open be a little bit more open minded. You know what I mean? But I think you know Elizabeth Moss. I think she does like a decent job at as the main character. I think unfortunately the main problem that I have with the film is when the Invisible Man is or like the antagonist and you don't know he's like conveniently like maybe like the most terrifying kung fu artist who can take down people or lift people up by the throat or do these kind of cool scary things, but then at other moments they're like a bumbling idiot, and it's just like, well, how did you manage to do this? Or there's one point where he gets covered in paint, but the next minute like like the paint's all gone. It's like, oh come on, no way he could have gotten rid of paint from this like really sophisticated suit, which they by the way made an effort to show how sophisticated it is, and it can get damaged and things like that. But anyway, this is me, you know, maybe this is like kind of me being a little bit too pedantic about it, but I think like a good film kind of has a lot of internal consistency, and I think the one thing that this movie does very consistently is like this feeling of like kind of uneasiness and dread because of this invisible menace that's kind of around the place. Like for
Yeah,
example,
well,
there's
that's
one
the thing.
time.
It's a cool premise because at any time, at any scene, you could be like, it could just pop out at now, rather than just
Yeah.
having like a stupid jump scare where it's like, yeah, it's gonna kind of happen. It could happen at any time in the middle of kind of the day, for example. And I feel like
Mhm.
it has an advantage probably on kind of that front, you know?
Yeah, like there's one scene where like she's like cooking like breakfast and then she leaves for a little bit and then you see like the fire kind of the like it gets increased and then now the pan's on fire and it leads to like a mini fire. So like initially if you're just cooking you're just thinking, oh shit, what did I do, right? Like, oh, this was my fault. But then you know obviously she's got like a lot of skepticism about what's going on around her, so she thinks her boyfriend's doing something. But then like the first moment she's outside and she's like breathing, and you can see like the cold air kind of being exhaled by her, and then you see behind her there's like an exhale, and it's like, oh shit, he's right behind her. It's really creepy, and I think that's the thing this movie does really well. This kind of sense of uneasiness that's presented by the Invisible Man character Adrian, or is it Adrian? I don't know.
Oh, well,
Uh,
obviously, I think as far as I know, this is, um, it reviewed really well, and also I think it made quite a bit of money. So I wouldn't be surprised that there's a sequel already kind of in place to kind of be made.
Invisible Woman.
Ooh,
I don't know.
ooh, oh, okay then. Here we go. Invisible Family, Invisible
Invisible
Bat
Family.
Family. It's Invisible Bat Family now, and
Yeah.
then we have dogs. We're gonna have like
Look,
everything.
look. I think ultimately, like if I were to give this movie a score, I'd give it like a 6. Like it's like above average, but it doesn't do anything like really really amazing. I think the thing that okay, I don't know, maybe 6.5 because the thing is like cinematography is really nice. I think you're gonna get. I know you're a cinematography buff, so
Yeah,
I think you're gonna really enjoy like a lot of the camera angle choices and a lot of like the lingering shots and it just gives you again it gives you the sense of unease like whether what's going on and whether you can really trust what's in the vicinity. So there's that, and then also just like the feeling of dread and kind of fear that you have of or especially she has of her ex-partner and just like certain reveals and stuff like maybe once you watch it we can go into a more kind of spoiler free kind of review of it because I think there's a lot of really interesting elements of it. I think the thing is like the end of the movie I felt was kind of like it kind of wrapped things up in a nice bow, but I don't know. It could have been done in a more interesting way. But again, I think again, like the movie I give like a 6.5. A good entry to I guess like the and a good kind of revamp to the Invisible Man kind of movie series in making it like very contemporary.
yeah, that's really good because yeah, a lot of the horror movie monsters is like they kind of had their ups and downs. Like obviously there was the new Mummy that not many people liked. Obviously, I didn't mind. What is it, Dracula Untold? That came out I
Mm-hmm.
think like in 2013, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a pretty good one. And then Wolfman doesn't really count. So hopefully they can continue on to make more of these because these are old licenses type of thing, like old
Yeah, I
ideas.
mean,
You
I
know,
mean, I'm looking it up now, and I think like the last movie, that had like the Invisible Man in it, like was Abbott and Costello meets the Invisible Man. So yeah, so there you go. And then that was like in 1951. So yeah, they haven't really done much with the IP. And I was thinking like, oh, there must have been one, but then you know what I was thinking of? I was thinking Hollow Man, not the
yeah,
Invisible Man,
I do
Hollow
remember that movie
Man.
as well because obviously we were probably kids around that time, and it was just like I do
Yeah.
remember there was some sort of invisible thing, but obviously they couldn't call it Invisible Man, so they're just like Hollow Man. Yeah, yeah, and I do remember that. Either way,
Hmm.
I've
Oh,
both of those movies I'm definitely gonna try to check out.
so apparently in November 2019, it was announced that a spin-off film centered around a female counterpart to The Invisible Man was in development. Elizabeth Banks was set to star in, direct, and produce the new adaptation of The Invisible Woman, based on the original story pitch. So I don't know if they're actually kind of following through with it, but hey, it's a thing maybe.
Yeah, no,
I was just mainly
either way, Universal needs some sort of franchises, I guess, because I think what they obviously they got Fast and Furious and things like that, but like obviously like they want to expand more and they have a lot of film history that they could tap a potential for. But yeah,
mhm.
I'm definitely going to check that out. So that's your review of The Invisible Man, and that's actually going to be us for this week. Remember, you can always listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, Libsyn, and our YouTube channel, Marketing Movies, where we stream live. So until next time, maybe Henry Cavill is going to be the Invisible Man because you can't see his face. But until next time, see ya.
Catcher.